My bad, not the no part. I was more about the recording. My
Just
apologies.
kidding. No, just kidding. Okay, here we are. So here's a FAR bar, but it doesn't matter. Also, too, they referenced FAR bar a lot, not as is, which I thought was interesting as well, but it really doesn't matter because it's all the same. And you know, the newest member to the Real Estate Commission is Kelly Price. She actually was one of the ones who kept saying, revocation, revoke the license. It was actually really funny to see, and I liked it. And Patty Ketchum, she's great. She's a real estate instructor who's on the board. Revoke. Those two were like big time revokers. I loved it. It was really cool. Okay. Here we go. Let's talk about this. Oh, I want to ask a question before we move on. This has come up twice now. What if, and this, because we have the information space in MLS, but you don't have to, it's not a required field, I wish it was, to put in the title company. But let's say you didn't have it and you filled it in, you said TBD by seller or whatever here, and then you got the contract executed. Now you need to fill this information in. So let's say this was executed yesterday on the 17th. Today you got the information on the title company, right? You fill in the information on the title company. Is the executed date the 17th or is it today the 18th? Who is going to answer that?
Today.
What?
Today.
Who else thinks it's today? Who thinks it's yesterday?
I think it's
Yesterday.
yesterday.
I think it's yesterday.
I think yesterday.
Where the signatures hit.
Escrow is just the clarification part.
But wouldn't you be altering the contract?
I love this. This is so much fun. Actually, thank you for playing. No, it actually was yesterday because it doesn't alter the contract because the seller, first of all, we wrote in there to be determined by seller. The seller is the one who picked it. So it does not alter the contract in any way. So this is probably the only boxes that would not affect changing the actual date of the contract. So you could change this, add this information, and it does not change the effective date of the contract because we did not change the terms of the contract. Does that make sense?
So we do not require any signature for both parties then.
Correct. We do not. But we need to have that filled in because if we don't and we get audited by DBPR, which trust me, they're doing that too. And I don't want to go in front of that commission. But if you do, that is one of the #1 reasons that you will get in trouble because the buyer at all times must know who holds their money and how to contact them. Remember that. So always make sure you go in there and fill that in. But it does not need to be initialed by everybody. We need to make sure that the buyer has a copy of this. The seller already knows who it is. We should give it to them anyway, so everybody has it, right? But they know because they're the ones who gave us that information, right? Does that make sense? Now, if we changed anything about the deposit, the timing, yes, that would change the effective date, right? Because now we're changing terms. If we change anything about the closing date, yes, that would change the date, right? Because we're changing the terms. But just to the actual title company does not change the actual effective date. Everybody good on that? All right. Subject to a lease. We've had some things about this too. This did not come up yesterday, but I do want to make sure everybody understands this subject to a lease. Remember, this is also, as of October of last year, also has to do with that new addenda. When you have a property that is short-term rental, like the Grove, and that property must be kept with a property management company, you need to make sure that you're using that addenda for vacation rentals because they have to accept that company, that vacation management company. It's subject to that too. So it's not subject to the lease per se because there's not an actual lease, but it's subject to the leasing company. Does that make sense? So you have to make sure that you're using that short-term addenda that goes with it. Does everybody know? Should we take a second and go into that addenda?
Yes.
Let's do that really quickly because that's one thing we deal with a lot and we may be dealing with more. And that's going to be we go under Florida Interactive Forms. I think this is an important one because I've noticed that a lot of people don't really understand this. Short. Not short sale. Well, let me see. Hold on. You know, the best way, and I shouldn't have done that. So let's go back to residential. I should show you this. You can get as is, it doesn't matter. How do we know exactly how to find the name? Anybody know?
Yes, yes, you call Jill or Cindy or Carrie.
Or there's a better way. You go to the back of the contract, the second to last page, and where all the addendums are, they tell you exactly what they are. Oh, right here. You look for it exactly as it says right here. Ooh, this is so awesome. So they tell you right here exactly what you're looking for. You see this? So you can see lease purchase lease option. Oh, that's not what we're looking for, but that you would look for that exact one right there. So if mortgage, fine, FHA, appraisal, short term, homeowners, and flooding, hold on, I'm looking for it, defective driveway, coastal installation, like base housing, rezoning, lease purchase, pre-closing, I hate pre and post. By the way, those are changed, pre and post. We should look at that too. Seller buyer's property backup contract, kick out, seller's attorney, license, binding, special taxing. Here it is. DD, good God, it took me forever to get there. Seasonal / vacation rentals. That is new, and so is PACE disclosure. But we don't really use PACE here. It's not something that you'll see a lot of here. It's more South Florida. But seasonal / vacation rentals, right there. That is what we need. So we go back into Florida Interactive Forms. We go down to Florida Interactive Forms. We don't even have to call anybody. It's like crazy how this works. It's like, oh my gosh. We type in seasonal. And did I spell it wrong? I probably did. Or did I not select the, I selected New Smyrna. Well, you won't find anything there. Seasonal, there you go. Seasonal. There it is, look at that. What? And as you see, there's only a far bar one. This is not part of CRISP, which is unusual. Woo, CRISP has not added this. So we go take a peek. And this is the one, if you're at the Grove, for example, that you need to have this included. The seller may or may not, after the effective date prior to closing, enter into a new or renewal season vacation rental occupancy agreement. So do they have to continue the one that they have, or do they have to do a new one? You have to know. Only with the buyer's prior approval of the rental terms or without the buyer's approval. So do we need to have the buyer's approval, or do we not have to have the buyer's approval? So at the Grove, listen, it doesn't matter. They have to do it. The buyer doesn't get to say they can do it or not. You can't buy at the Grove. You have to be part of that management company, don't you? Right? At the Grove, if you purchase, you have to use that management company. Your home has to be part of that, the rental program. See, this is why it's important to use that. If the property has seasonal occupancy agreements in place, which were procured pursuant to the terms of the property management, seller shall provide to buyer a copy of all property management agreements within 5 days after the effective date, just like the lease. In terms of any agreement provided by the seller, if they're not acceptable to the buyer has 5 days after to terminate the contract. So it's the exact same thing as a lease. So if this is the Grove, the seller has to provide the management company lease. The buyer has the right to say, oh, wait a minute, I have to be part of this. I don't like this. They can then in writing say they want to terminate the contract because they do not agree to that terms, and they can get out of the contract. It's an actual contingency. So a lot of people don't realize that, but it is in the same time frame. At the time of contract, within 5 days of the effective date of the contract, they have to receive that. And they have then 5 days to agree or not agree. If they don't put anything in writing, they've agreed, right? Silence is an agreement. There you go. It's just you waive that contingency. Everybody with me? But this is one thing. Now, Solterra, do you have to use? I don't think you have to be part of that. Does anybody else know any other like short-term rental that you have to be part of that management company? I think that Reunion, you have a choice, but you do have to pick one of 5, don't you? Is Janice on? I think I'm going to see Janice. Janice, is Janice on?
Carrie.
I'm here, Janet.
Janet, can you share?
Yeah, so really anybody. The only time it really comes into play is with the membership. So if you want your guests to have access, then you actually have to choose one of 3 companies to be able to give your guests access to the amenities. But you can essentially rent anyway.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. So is there
No.
any other communities that you work with that they have to use a specific management company? Janet?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Not off the top of my head.
Okay, Linda, how about you? Because you do short term. Linda Fu, anybody else on here have any? I know the Grove, that's the one that I know specifically because they had their own like hospitality company on site that you must use.
What about Margaritaville?
Which one? Margaritaville?
Margaritaville?
That may be the case.
Yeah.
And you know what else also may be the case is, I just went out of my head. Oh gosh, good golly, Miss Molly, just went out of my head. The other one down there, lordy, it's.
I think it's going to be
Oh,
changing in
Magic Village. Does Magic Village have one that you have to use or no? I don't know. Daniel's not on the call. Okay.
I think it's
but-
going to be changing for Ocala Preserve. Right now, they'll let you use anybody in Ocala Preserve.
So just keep that in
Carrie.
mind. Yes.
Magic Village, they do have their own company there, but you don't have to use them.
You don't have to. Okay. Thanks, Fran. Yeah. Just so you know
Yeah.
that. But that
You
is
cannot use
also-
the clubhouse, but yeah.
And guys, things like that, be very, very careful that you are also telling that, because I'm going to tell you another thing that I'm not supposed to talk about, and I'm recording this, so I'm not saying this, but it did come to an ethics case that it was won by the person that put it in. So the listing agent did not include that kind of information on their HOA information. They did not put the capital contribution, and then they did not say, if you do not use certain information, you cannot use certain things on the property. They did not disclose that properly. And it did get down to, in this instance, the seller was also the realtor, so I think that made it worse. Okay, but that's always a bad thing. But it did go to an ethics case. By the way, ethics cases are up a lot. There's a lot more ethics cases happening right now at the board, I can tell you that. So, and that's probably going to continue to happen. As people get more desperate, they're going to be filing more cases against other people. So we're always good. We know what to do, but be very careful about disclosures like that. If we know, if you don't use this company, you will lose the rights. Put that in realtor remarks. Make sure that we're disclosing everywhere we can information like that we know. We're not ultimately necessarily responsible, especially if we're not the seller, but we want to disclose everything that we know. Does that make sense? In that instance, like I mentioned, the seller was the realtor, so it got really, really bad, and they lost that ethics case, and that wasn't a good one. But and it was also money involved as well, so it was a bad one. But you just want to make sure that we are disclosing everything that we can. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay. Now, this particular case that that went down to yesterday at the FREC was very interesting, because this particular buyer said the contract was contingent on VA, right? He said 45 days. He put the rate in here. He would do it within 5 days of financing, right? All these things were good. He made his application and he got the appraisal. He did all these things, but guess what? He got denied. It's $20,000 deposit. He was trying to get his money back. Now, the denial came back after the loan approval. So let's say the loan approval was 45 days. Let's make it 30 for just, this particular case. I don't remember the actual numbers, but let's say it was 30 days. It came back, the loan approval letter came back, the denial rather, let's say it came back at 35 days, right? But they didn't actually have in writing at the FREC. Was it 35 days? Was it 32 days? They had it somewhere in the file, but they didn't actually have any evidence of that, okay? So the seller was claiming the funds. The buyer was claiming the funds. Who really should receive the funds, right? Well, this was the real issue. Hey, Sonia. The real issue was, you know why the buyer was denied the VA loan? The buyer was not a veteran. Thus, the buyer's brother was the veteran, right? So here's the question. Was it a fraudulent loan? Did he not realize that he couldn't get a VA loan? Okay, so how do you say, right? Okay, we don't know necessarily because we didn't actually have in writing in this particular instance. Was it really, did it come back after the loan approval period? Because that would be pretty clear, but they didn't actually have that in writing. But now we know for sure the guy got denied because it says in the denial letter, because he's not a VA. So they were,
Sounds like a crappy loan officer.
they were all saying that.
How do
Marie.
you not have the certificate of eligibility within a day of application?
Right? Well, and hello, how does the guy not know he's not a veteran? Like, Mhm.
So, but the brother was.
The brother was a
wasn't-
veteran.
But wasn't in the title at all. in the
No,
contract, in the offer.
Never was in it that they knew of, right? Again, they went to go get more supporting evidence and nothing was given. So this is the other thing. When you do an escrow disbursement order, they ask for supporting documents. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. In this instance, they didn't get it, but it's 20 grand on the line. And so they're trying to determine who gets the money. So looking at this, on this page is the answer. Can anybody tell me who got the money and why? Because it's right here, the answer. What do you guys think? Dun, dun, dun.
I said the seller,
Why do you think the seller, Luciana?
because it's after, whatever days.
So Luciana thinks it's the seller because it's after the days, but we don't have the true evidence that it's after the days. So it's almost like hearsay because they don't actually have the letter saying when it was denied. They don't have the, like if they had the letter saying it was denied on such and such a date, they could prove that it came back at that date, but it was in like an email, right? So you don't really know. That's the problem. So it's kind of like hearsay at that point, right? Okay. So that really wasn't the answer.
Well, not the.
So was it the buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain the loan approval during the loan period? Be considered a default under the terms of their contract.
I am so proud of you. That is exactly what it went down to. Buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort. Because using good faith and diligent effort, they would know they would not been able to get a VA loan, being the fact that they were not a veteran. Absolutely. So based on this one line 102, that is why the seller received the money and the buyer did not. So I found it very interesting. It had nothing to do with the dates because we would always go to the dates, wouldn't we? Now, of course, in our instance, we'd actually have the real letter in front of us and it'd make it easier. But I found it very interesting to see that the FREC actually really relied on this good faith and diligent effort very, very strongly. That so much so that they would put a very simply $20,000 case on the line for this good faith and diligent effort. So I want to say we need to be very, very careful explaining how much good faith and diligent effort means to our buyers, because that could mean a lot of things. If, for example, if a buyer has changed a loan type and doesn't let us know, and then gives us a denial of a different loan type, it doesn't matter, right? Because if we've written a conventional loan here and then we get an FHA denial, they don't get the money, do they? Or do they? If we've written here that the buyer is approved a conventional loan within 30 days, they give us a denial within the 30 days, but the denial is for an FHA loan. Do they get the money back? Anybody?
No, they do not.
No.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Tony. They do not, because it said conventional. We did not make it contingent on FHA, right? Their good faith and diligent effort was to get a conventional loan, not an FHA loan. So therefore, it had to be the denial based on the conventional loan, right? So the other thing that we have to be very, very careful of, and they talked about this, although it did not come up to the money, but is this wonderful little thing, again, about us making sure that we put in writing whether they are approved by the loan approval period. If within the loan approval period, buyer obtains a loan approval, and I'm on line 111, buyer shall notify the seller by same in writing prior to the end of the loan approval period. Are we all doing that? Because remember, if we're not, what can the seller do? If they do not put that in writing, the seller is able to cancel this contract for the next 3 days. Remember that? This is something that happens and is continuing to happen. They have 3 days to cancel the contract right here on line 123. Seller may elect to terminate this contract by delivering written notice of termination to the buyer within 3 days after the expiration of the loan period. Now notice buyer's not in default, so therefore they'll get their money back, right? So if you're representing the buyer and the buyer, you've got the loan approval and you just forget to put in writing, we've received the loan approval. You could receive a release and cancellation the next day for the next 3 days. And that is totally okay. They are in their right to do that. And now your buyer will get their money back, but your buyer is now homeless and it's going to be your fault. And if it's your fault, there could be costs that can come down on you, like the inspection, the appraisal, the moving costs, right? The buyer's going to be looking at somebody to want to sue. And who are they going to look at? Can a buyer file a case against you for code of ethics against the board, against you? Yes, they can. They can file against you there, and they can also file against you with DBPR, can they not? So these cases, I'm telling you, have been increasing because, not for us, but I will tell you, thank God, that's why we're talking, but over the last year or two, there has been such an influx of new agents. Listen, last month, I could tell you because I just saw the numbers, we had 3,542, so 3,542 new licensees join Aura. Not Aura, I'm sorry, Florida Realtors. I think that was a Florida Realtors number. Now I gotta look back in my backpack. That's not a low number, right? That was Florida Realtors. 3,542 new realtors joined, not realtors, but agents got licensed last month. This is continuing to happen. And so what's happening is these people are not trained. Oh my God, one person, this is hysterical. One of the people who lost their license yesterday, when they took a rental check and they actually had the money Zelled to them, they said they were with one brokerage, but their license was actually with a different brokerage. They didn't even know who their broker was. I mean, this is insanity, guys, right? So we just have to know that right now, a lot of people don't know what they're doing, right? We just know that. So we have to be very diligent to make sure that we're protecting our customers on both sides of that fence. So unfortunately, we just have to know double, right? But I just want you to be very, very clear that people are getting very savvy because they're becoming very cautious stepping into this real estate right now, right? So they're going to be very, very cautious about what's happening. So we have to be very, very clear as to what's happening, and we have to know what FREC is looking for. And right now, it looks to me like they're looking to clean house. It's just wow, which is not a bad thing, right? It really isn't. But they're really wanting to make sure that we're protecting the customer, which is great. And some of these things we have to really understand. So let's talk a little bit about here too, because this is another thing that I think people don't think about. This is something that we can talk about with Maria right here. How many of you still leave blank not to exceed this interest rate? I mean, I think I still see a lot of things blank on that.
I have until recently.
I mean, the interest rates are they're fluctuating so fast still, I would say. This is something you really want to be very cautious of, guys, to protect your customers. You know, it could change. I mean, we don't know. This is
Overnight.
Yeah, I mean, right. And so we have to make sure that we are understanding what their risk factor is for the customer that's buying and what would make them uncomfortable purchasing at. Not necessarily for their percentage, but what's that's going to do to their monthly payment or what they're qualified up to. because that's really what's changed. A lot of people have been qualified out of what they need to be at. So this is where we need to be talking to Maria or whoever their loan person is to see what we can actually go up to, right? So you need to be filling this in, because this particular little box can actually be the contingency that gets them out of the contract with their money. All of the other things, they might have been able to get the loan. They might have been able to be qualified for everything. The home might have appraised perfectly, but instead of it being 6%, it might be 7% or 6.5%. They can actually get out of that home with their deposit because you wrote 6 or 5.5. Right? Now, if today's rate is what, Maria, 5.25, 5?
Yeah, somewhere around there with good credit scores. Yeah. 5.5, 5.25.
So maybe
But you know what's interesting about that? And I don't know how this would work.
Yeah.
When you put in an interest rate, you can get a certain interest rate, but you'd have to pay 3-4 points for it. So what do you do then?
No, but this is not with points. This is not saying with
This just
points.
assumes 0 points?
Yes. Yeah. This
Where
is not
does it
saying-
say that though?
But it
I mean,
doesn't
you would have,
say says at an initial interest rate.
right, but your initial interest rate could still be, I don't know, you could still buy the rate down to get there. I
Yeah,
don't know.
but this is not assuming that you have to buy the rate. This is that you're qualified at this rate. I've never seen this to include that you have to buy the rate down.
Yeah.
I never seen that for qualification purposes, because you could say they're
Yeah.
qualified, but this is the rate I can give them. You don't have to show. Remember, you're the one writing a denial because you're the one saying, or you
Yeah.
can say, this is what I can give them, but it's only at 7%. This is what they're qualified at,
True.
And then all we
Very-
have to do is show that. Mhm.
Quick question. So that rate, so let's say somebody put a rate in there, let's say 7%. That needs to be, this is during the approval period, right? If the approval
Yes.
is already gone, then it doesn't matter, right? If the rate
Correct.
change.
Correct.
Okay.
So basically, this is also saying that they're disqualified, because you could have gotten a loan, right? So you don't have to say they're not qualified, Marie. You can say, yeah, they've got a loan, but their loan is now 7%. And you can say, this is all we could get is 7%. And we said that the rate is not to exceed 6%. So
Right.
now she doesn't have to write that they're denied a loan, but you're saying all we could get is 7%, and this is 6%. And now you can get out of the contract based upon this one little box here. You see my point? But
Yeah.
to your point, it has to be within that 30 days or whatever you've given yourself right here, right within the effective date for the loan approval period. To your point, if it's past that, it doesn't matter, which is why you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to the closing date for the loan approval period. So people who try to cut this short, that's not a good idea, because now you have an open window where the rates can go crazy. Now, hopefully you've locked your rate, right? Because that's what most people are doing. They've locked their rate. So you should be locked by that point. I mean, who leaves it not locked, right? You would have been locked. So you should be fine. Does that make sense? So that's really important about that right there. So make sure, especially in this market right now, that you are filling that in. Everybody good with that? Okay. Another thing that I want you to be very aware of too is I think that we're in a market right now that you could be doing the loan, the appraisal contingency again. I have not seen people turning them down. I've been seeing more and more come through with appraisal contingencies. How about you guys?
Yes.
Anybody else noticing that? Dawn, have you used any appraisal contingencies or seen them come through?
Yeah, on my last 2.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing because, with the market shifting like this, we're not really sure what they're going to be appraising at. And I think, to protect your buyer, you want to make sure that you're adding one if you can, if the seller will accept that. Because remember, that is this whole thing. This is saying, again, if the buyer does not pay for the appraisal in the beginning, and that's the reason we don't have the information on the appraisal, that is considered diligent effort. So you can't come back and be like, well, we didn't get the loan because we don't have the appraisal. You can't say that, right? And if you happen to write in there, well, that they'll purchase the home at the home, or will play more for above appraisal, or if you've written any of that stuff in there, you've tried to negate that, right? And the lender's not going to give them a denial. Well, you're going to have to close. Remember, because if the lender won't deny them the loan, then you cannot get out based upon a loan denial for appraisal. Does that make sense? So,
And I'm noticing it's all over the place too, because I've had appraisals that have come in low. And then I also just got an appraisal waiver yesterday. So it's definitely a fluid market, moving different areas, different problems. I don't know.
and one other interesting thing I really want to talk about that's come up now 3 times that I've seen. I want you to see down here, the failure to close situation right here. There's 2 reasons that a buyer would get their money back if they don't close. If the seller's default or inability to satisfy contingencies, or if the property related conditions of the loan approval, not excluding the appraisal, right, have not been met. Okay, so if the loan approval says you had to get the new roof and then they didn't put it on, obviously you couldn't get the home, right? Or if the seller said they're gonna, do something and then they don't do it, then obviously the buyer would get their money back. Those are the only 2 things. Do you see anything in here in regards to anything having to do with not liens, but anything having to do with open permits? Nothing, right? Nothing about open permits. Well, I've had 2 instances just recently, a 3rd one lately, but one particular one, we knew about the open permits. We knew there were open permits from the beginning. It was a really weird case about these strange open permits. And the seller kept saying, oh, we can get it grandfathered in, but the air conditioning is Carrie Bellish on the call? Carrie, are you here? I don't think she's on the call. It was her situation. The air conditioning was on the wrong side. You know how much that would cost to move air conditioning over to the other side of the house? That's a lot of money. And he said that he knew the person at the county that could just waive that. Well, if he knew the person at the county, why didn't they waive it beforehand? So this was going on and on. Now, we knew about the situation in the beginning. So before the end of the inspection period, we wrote an addendum stating that these specific issues had to be handled and taken care of at the seller's expense prior to closing. So long story short, we actually ended up canceling the contract and getting the buyer's money back because it never got handled. It would have cost thousands of dollars to move that air conditioning to the other side of the house. And the seller didn't want to do it. Well, the fact that the seller didn't want to do it should have been obviously, a red flag. And the agent who was the friend of the seller kept trying to push it off. Oh, it's no big deal. I mean, they didn't even really know what it would cost. It was a very strange situation. Oh, and by the way, the seller was the builder. So now we know there's another bigger issue, right? So that's one thing. But had we not done that, there's nothing about open permits. And an open permit is not a cloud on a title. So the only way in a contract like this, in an as-is or even a FAR bar, a FAR bar, at least you have, if you're in a FAR bar, you have an open permit section. So if you're in an actual FAR bar contract, you would have had a section that would have handled that. You would have had open permit section, and I'll get there. Am I in an as-is? Oh, I'm in an as-is. In an as-is, you're in trouble. You have this particular part, the right to inspect, right to cancel, and that's all you have. Because in an as-is contract, the right here, the permits is all on the buyer. Keep that in mind. For those of you who love to use your as-is contracts, I keep trying to bring a horse to water, but I can't make you drink. So you do what you want to do. But it tells you right here under, where is that? Where's my OR? Which is catch-all for anything that could possibly ever happen now. Let's go over to, property inspection.
But don't we have that great clause in dot loop now for permits?
We do. We have to add it though, because I want you to see here. No, here it is. Hold on. Where is permits time? Where's permits here? Am I going too fast? Waiver riders, FERPTA. I think I passed it again. I know, I can't imagine me going too fast, but I feel like I have. Okay. Closing, occupancy, possession, property assignability, financing, closing costs, title evidence. It's got to come up in a second. Survey, special assessments, permits. No, that's disclosure.
No,
Closure.
there's a thing.
That's special assessments. Okay, this is killing me. Where is permits on this thing? Property, oh, here it is. That was property right to inspect. Oh, here it is. Sorry, I passed it like several times. Seller assistance and cooperation in closeout of permits. In buyer's inspection of property, identifies open or needed permits. Seller shall deliver plans to the buyer and any information that they have, knowledge, and then it can. So if they have to, be there on the property, cooperate in good faith, but the buyer's efforts to obtain estimates and repairs. Okay. The seller is not obligated and shall not be obligated or required to expend or become obligated to expend any money. It's the buyer who has to find out about it, the buyer who has to get the estimates, and the buyer who has to pay for it in an as-is contract. We do have in clauses, let me show you this so everybody knows where it is, a really nifty little thing that we had added by Phil. So remember under here, under clauses. But property, clauses, come on. There we go. Where did it go? Okay, seller's not responsible to close out. No, that's the seller. Seller is not responsible to close out. Where did I put that? The combined amount shall be charged. Seller is not responsible to close out this contract in a month on Airbnb. I don't see it here. I have to see where I put that. Wasn't it right here under clauses, April?
Yeah, I just saw it there recently. I mean, really, like within the last 2 weeks.
Wonder if I didn't share it with both offices. Hold on, let me take a quick peek. I may have to move it over to Lake Nona too. So, but the point is, guys, in an actual residential contract, it is the seller's obligation. In an as-is contract, it is the buyer's obligation. But so we're very clear, a open permit or needed permit is not a cloud on the title. And so therefore, you can't come back after the inspection period in an as-is contract and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to close. You have an open permit. It doesn't matter. You don't have a right to get out because of that. And therefore, the buyer will lose their money, their deposit. So just so you're aware of that. There's an Airbnb, nice contingency in here. This is the seller's, seller is responsible. It was there, I don't know. Seller is responsible to close out all open and expired permits and pull all permits for work not properly permitted prior to closing. It's that little ditty. It was over there. I just read it wrong. So you can add that to an as-is contract if you're going to do that, to put it on there. However, I just want you to be very aware. It's still going to be on you to make sure that you find out if there's open permits. Because if you didn't find out there were open permits, you could say that they're required, but when are you going to find out that there's open permits? The seller is not going to go looking for them, right? So it will come up on a lien search, but you got to make sure that you are looking for that, because the seller's agent is not going to look for that. Is everybody clear on that? Okay. Any questions? I hope you guys all got something out of my FREC. Keep yourself out of FREC jail, because no, you don't want to go there. Also should touch on the insurance addendum. Oh yeah, that's a good one, Dawn. Let's look at the insurance addendum real quick. Thank you. Share screen, share. Let's look at the insurance addendum documents. Florida Interactive Forms. Don't you remember what it's called? To make my life easier. Insurance. I don't think it would be called insurance addendum. That would be so much easier. Oh, here it is. Oh, that's a crisp one. That's not it. Insurance coverage and disclosures addendum. That's crisp. Yeah, you don't want that one. Flood insurance, flood insurance. This is the crisp one. Huh, what's the far bar
I
one?
think the one above that though says homeowners and flood.
But it says, oh, maybe it does. You're right, you're right. Let's take a quick peek. Yeah. Yeah, here we go. Homeowners insurance. If buyer is unable to obtain homeowners insurance coverage, including windstorm, from a standard carrier or a citizen's property insurance corporation, remember that's the Florida insurance one, at a first year annual premium not to exceed, you could put a dollar amount or a percentage of the purchase price by, if like blank, 30 days after the effective date. Buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice to the seller by the date set forth in this paragraph, and buyer shall be refunded the deposit. This is a great new addendum, and this is the FAR bar one. Yep, came out in 2021. This is a terrific one. I should add it actually to our contracts. Yeah, this is a really good one. They also have a flood insurance, which is not something we typically need, but this one is really important for the homeowners insurance. Now, remember, with Premier Concierge Insurance, they do have a carrier that can go 20 years as long as the home is in good shape on an architectural single roof. However, even in that instance, I still would add this because this is just a really good, because remember, if you're in a FAR bar contract, the roof is still considered cosmetic roof life. I mean, obviously, if there's any structural damage or leaking, it's not. But if it is roof life, it's still cosmetic. Now, you might not be able to get, obviously, a loan. However, if you can get insurance, but it's just very high, you're still not going to be able to get out of the contract, right? This gives you the opportunity to set the price of your premium. So this is where this addenda is awesome. So thank you for reminding me of that, John. That's a great addenda that we all should be using to protect our buyers. Now on the sales side, we probably hate to see this come through, but it's the truth of where we're at right now. And to that point, if you have a seller and your roof is somewhat older, up to 20 years on an architectural shingle, also on a tile roof, and if it's a more expensive home, then we could do the Chubb product. I highly recommend you talk to our Premier Concierge ahead, get a quote, put it in as a supplemental document into your listing, put it under realtor remarks that you have a quote, that you have a carrier that can do insurance on this home as is. We need to be being proactive on this so that people don't come to us later and say, oh, we can't get insurance, right? Because we know that's going to happen, right? So if we could be proactive, then we can get around that easier. Does that make sense? Thank you, John. So this is great. You know what? I'm going to add this into our .loop as is and residential file, just so that we all have it, because I think it's a really good one. So anybody else, I hope you all got something good. That was a great one, Dawn. Thank you for that. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Anybody requests for Monday's training? Anybody have a request on what we're going to do for Monday? I was going to do something listing related, of course, but unless anybody has a request.
Yeah, the pre and post closing, you said there were changes on there. You can't just tease us like that. And then...
Oh, no. I hate them. I will show you. I cannot do that on a Monday. That will just give me
okay. All right.
I'll just show you them really quick right now. Because I just can't. No, I hate everything about post or pre-closing.
Okay.
No, oh, please. Occupancy in general. I mean, just wait. Move in the house when it's sold. I mean, come on.
I have one right now.
All right, there you go.
Listen, let me just say this. If we have the seller and it's our seller who stays, I feel better. If we have the buyer and it's our buyer who moves in early, I feel better. But at the end of the day, it's just a bad situation. Because if it's our buyer who lets another seller stay, then guess what? If the seller doesn't move out, our buyer may not get to move in and may have to evict the seller, right? And if it's our seller who lets the buyer move in and the buyer never buys it, now is our seller who may never get to sell it and move on and has to evict. So this is the problem, right? So that's the reality. But this is the post-closing. But so you see, what they've really done is kind of really watered it down, which I really like. And basically what it's saying is it's contingent upon buyer and seller within blank days 10, delivering to each other a mutually acceptable written lease or post-occupancy agreement or similar agreement. So it doesn't have to be this long. It should not be a very long lease agreement. It should not be anything crazy. And you decide who's going to do it. Seller's going to pay for it, buyer's going to pay for it, or they split it, right? And then it's for them to seller to stay in possession of the property until what date, right? And the post occupancy agreement shall provide that the seller will pay how much rent and pay monthly in advance for the seller's maintenance obligation. And they will continue in the possession of the buyer until the seller will continue keeping up with the house until closing. And if parties fail to deliver this mutual acceptable agreement in writing, then basically the buyer will be refunded the money and then they will be released from this contract. So it is also a contingency that they can both get out. But basically what it's saying, guys, is it could be a very simply worded document. If they're only going to stay for 30 days, do you need to do a full lease? No. You don't. We do not need to make more out of this than it needs to be. I actually saw one person send a 5-page lease for a 30-day post-occupancy. I mean, really? We do not need to do that. This just needs to be a simplistic thing that they're both agreeing upon. I still hate it. I hate it all. Don't get me wrong. But it just has to be something that they agree to in writing, kind of states who's doing what, who's paying for what, who's taking, I mean, they have to decide, like, if it's 30 days, are the utilities going to stay in the cellars? You know, who's handling all that, right? If it's going to be 6 months, right? Is it going to be, then you need something longer. You need something more serious. You need something with more meat on it. This is where you have to determine that. But based upon whatever it is, you have to decide. If it's going to be an 8-month thing, you should get a lease. If it's going to be a 30-day, a post-occupancy agreement kind of written thing is going to be better. So that's why this is what they did. And the same thing is on the pre-occupancy. It does the same thing. It's just basically says pre-occupancy. Everybody good? I hate that, but there it is. Don't do it. Avoid it. Okay. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to sharing more with you. It's Florida Realtors, so I have so many more fun. I will be on today, District 12. I have Florida Realtors Board of Directors. I have so many more wonderful things, but that means I learn about all this great stuff that I'm not supposed to share, and you know I will. So don't tell anybody yet. Don't put it on social media for sure. I'll get in big trouble for that. But just know Florida Realtors is here to protect property rights. That's great stuff. And I will continue to share all the updates of really cool stuff that's going on. Okay. So everybody have a great rest of your day. And thanks for joining me. Bye.
Bye, everybody.